Let's bring in Christy Greenberg, MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor, and Shelby Talcott, White House reporter for Semaphore. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. What do you, Shelby, know about this back and forth? I mean, it's odd that he would think the question was about the 1798 Act and whether or not he had signed that.
Yeah, you've heard, I mean, you just heard what the White House's argument is, and we've heard Donald Trump sort of say strange things before, but by and large, this is could be really tough for him because he just said this. There's an ongoing legal battle. Almost certainly this is going to become involved in that legal battle, and it kind of muddies the waters in terms of the White House's argument here. And so it's going to be really interesting to see over the next few days how that plays out in the courts, because certainly Donald Trump's words are going to be used against him here.
Christy, what is the significance of him signing it, him not signing it, if it was an auto pen potentially?
Well, his explanation to start with doesn't make a lot of sense because he not only said he didn't sign it, but he said he had other people handling it for him, I believe. Well, if he was talking about the 1798 proclamation, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So yeah. I share your skepticism that, in fact, he was talking about his executive order and not the 1798 order. But you know, the law is clear that the president actually needs to sign off on any executive orders related to, to invoke the proclamation. So whether or not that's by auto pen or not, I don't see as an issue as long as he's, signing it or directing somebody else to have his signature on the proclamation. I think that's all that's required. This auto pen issue is an issue that the Trump administration has brought up to attack some of the Biden pardons. I don't really think there's a there as long as there is a presidential signature that the president is authorized. I think that's more than sufficient. But the question will be if there was one.
Christy, the consequences, what could the White House face if Judge Boasberg concludes there was a violation of the order he issued last week?
So that's a really good question, because it does seem like Judge Boasberg is taking this process very seriously. He wants to know if his orders were defied, and by that meaning when the planes were in the air, they were not returned. And Judge Boasberg's order was very clear that if there are planes in the air headed to El Salvador, they need to be turned around and returned. And that clearly didn't happen. So it's hard to see actually how they haven't defied his orders because, again, these people haven't been returned here. So Judge Boasberg wants to get to the bottom of it as to if he finds that they did disobey him and that it was willful, what kinds of remedies are there for contempt? Well, there's a difference between civil contempt and criminal contempt. You could be looking at fines, but you could also be looking at potentially something that is more serious related to the case, maybe adverse inferences related to the case. But, it's really hard to say. I think the other problem here is that even if it was some kind of criminal contempt that any of these officials were found to have committed, I mean, Trump can also just pardon those people for anything criminal. So it's hard to see that anything's really going to have a lot of teeth, unfortunately, but we'll see what Judge Boasberg does.
Shelby, the Trump administration already has over 15 pending appeals there for a variety of rulings against their policies. Has the White House indicated how they will fight back if this particular judgment ultimately doesn't go their way?
Well, listen, I think we've heard differing things. We've heard from the administration that they'll follow these court orders. We've also heard that they believe that all of this is unconstitutional. But I think part of the strategy here is sort of overwhelming the system. Donald Trump came into office and did a huge amount in a very short period of time. Part of the reason for that was in anticipation for some of these legal pushbacks. And so the idea here is that the sort of opponents or the perceived opponents of the administration sort of won't be able to handle the mass coming out of the Trump administration, the amount of things that they are putting out. So that's sort of part of the theory of the case here from the Trump administration. And certainly I anticipate that that's going to continue. They're going to continue pushing these in every avenue, whether it's, on X, where you see Elon Musk and Donald Trump calling for the impeachment of a judge, or whether it is in court, or whether it is on the president's Truth Social. They're going to use every single avenue possible.
Also, Shelby, overnight, President Trump revoked those security clearances for 15 officials. That includes Vice President Kamala Harris and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. How's the White House explaining this move?
We've heard from the White House about this. Their argument essentially is, A, that something similar was done to Donald Trump after January 6th. B, they've made it pretty clear that they don't believe that these individuals should have security clearances. And part of it is simple. Part of it is you look at some of the other names on that list, Antony Blinken, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, right? These are opponents of Donald Trump. And so I don't think that they're hiding the ball here in terms of at least part of the reason why they're revoking these security clearances.
Okay, but Christy, legal officials she's mentioning there, including New York Attorney General Letitia James, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, they lose their access. So do they have a legal case against Trump if it compromises their ability to do their jobs?
I think it's really tough. The president has, an extraordinary amount of deference as to who he affords security clearance to. He can revoke that, and it's pretty much unreviewable. That said, I really do think that, at least with respect to DA Bragg in particular, not having access to classified information will certainly compromise his personal ability to review cases that involve domestic, foreign terrorism, which there is New York State, terrorism laws that are on the books, and those are cases that the DA's office takes on. So, would DA Bragg maybe need to rely on some of his deputies to review that classified information in those cases and not have access to it in order for that office to continue? I mean, that seems like it would be the default, but that is certainly not ideal. And as you said, would really compromise his ability to be able to oversee that office in those kinds of really important cases that affect public safety.
Yeah. What about Columbia University, which now agrees to Trump's terms to get their $400 million in federal funding reinstated, Shelby? What are the demands they have agreed to meet?
Well, they're instituting. They're going to have a bunch of essentially police officers who can remove people from campus. They have agreed to better define anti-Semitism. So there's a whole host of things that the university has agreed to. And by the way, we don't yet know whether the Trump administration is going to reinstate this funding. They haven't said so yet. But it's also not surprising, in my opinion, that they have agreed to all of these demands, because we're seeing this play out in other areas as well. The powerful law firm Paul Weiss recently met with the administration, and they agreed to certain conditions. And as a result, the president has rescinded his executive order targeting them. And so you're seeing the administration put pressure on a whole host of industries. And we're seeing in these industries, these communities are sort of bowing down and saying, OK, we'll agree to your conditions.
So big picture, Christy, what kind of precedents can this set? Columbia is the example, because the White House is setting its sights on the country's education institutions. Does it only embolden Trump to have institutions cave, for lack of a better word?
Yes. I mean, this is really extraordinary, especially from Columbia, because this is just to allow them to start negotiations. By agreeing to all of these demands, the Trump administration has not actually agreed to restore the $400 million. This is just so that they can start to talk. That's a pretty weak negotiating position. And I think, particularly when you are looking at the law firm of Paul Weiss, where that executive order was in place, it was a blatantly unconstitutional order. There's actually another judge with respect to another law firm, Perkins Coie, who said that essentially the same order violated the First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. So if it's blatantly unconstitutional, why wouldn't you challenge it? And at least for Columbia, and I think for the law firm, it's really money talks. When there's money involved and the law firm could lose business and the university could lose federal funding, they really want to make sure to be able to keep the money flowing. And unfortunately, that is only going to embolden Trump further. He's already sent out a memo last night, Bondi, saying you should look at other law firms that are challenging the administration in various ways and look to whether or not we should have similar orders against them. And hopefully there's some firms who will stand up to that and say, we are going to challenge this unconstitutional order in court rather than just accede to these demands.